In Sword and Shield, Game Freak experimented with open world areas via the wild areas. The idea was decently received, but had many flaws to buff out.
But just over a year later, Pokemon Legends Arceus marks a new step for the Pokemon franchise. The new game was revealed in a Pokemon Presents following the Gen 4 remakes reveal. It was positioned as a counterpart to the remakes and ultimately perked the ears of disappointed fans after the lackluster reception of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl.
As trailers were uploaded and YouTubers dissected frames, expectations slowly arose for Pokemon Legends Arceus, when the fateful day finally arrived. Everyone seemed to love it, but over time it definitely showed some cracks.
After we've had the game in our hands for a good few months, and Game Freak has already shown off the next generation of Pokemon, let's dissect the good, the bad, and the ugly of Pokemon Legends Arceus.
The region of Hisui was advertised at first as a completely open world. Later on, we found that the region was built of 5 separate areas in a single central village. The semi-open world is still a step in a better direction than Sword and Shield's wild areas, but still isn't flawless. The general consensus among fans is that the Hisui region feels empty and dull. In my playthrough, I found myself exploring every corner of the early areas to confirm I didn't miss anything, or any Pokemon. 15 hours into the game, I still really enjoyed running around and discovering new Pokemon, but as I arrived in Coronet Highlands, I realized that I caught most of the Pokemon already. In fact, according to my Pokedex, I already caught 30 of the Pokemon in the 5th Iceland area, which I hadn't accessed yet at the time. So my time exploring the 4th and 5th areas were a fraction of what the previous areas were.
It got so bad that the endgame turned to a race to the credits. But those first few hours? Bliss.
Once I got access to rideable Pokemon, speeding through sections was way too easy, so I didn't end up exploring every corner like I did in early areas. For a great example in exploration pacing, let's look at Breath of the Wild. I know, I shouldn't be comparing them, but here we are. Anyways, during Breath of the Wild, you have walking, climbing, and gliding to explore Hyrule.
Did you just say climbing?
You serious?
If there's one thing that's just incredibly painful about exploring the Hisui region, it's the fact that there's no climbing by default. I don't know about you, Dakota, but in Breath of the Wild, I always get this temptation to climb steep slopes just because I could do so very easily. In Legends Arceus, you have no idea how many times I wiggled the character side to side and pressed the Y button, just to fruitlessly climb a slope that I wasn't supposed to climb, and end up sliding back down. I'll say the same thing about swimming. Dive into the water, wait around for around 3 strokes, then your character stops and suddenly splashes around like crazy, before the screen turns black, and you respawn. That's the thing that gets me. The way that this game was designed makes you think that you can interact in all sorts of ways with the environment. But instead, it forces itself to be like a regular Pokemon game, and makes the characters all have to rely on Pokemon to traverse the world.
Also, the pacing was dependent on the player, and since Breath of the Wild's open world has something to do every few steps, the world feels alive and busy. Limiting the player to those 3 vehicles allows the player to keep the same pace throughout, and really take in the world. But if the player were to be given the DLC's motorcycle at the start of the game, everyone would likely be speeding from each main mission to the next. Another reason Hisui feels dead is because the Pokemon aren't really doing anything. They're just walking around with the occasional extra animation. To sell a wild Pokemon world, the Pokemon should be interacting with each other, whether that be battling each other, stalking from afar, or actively locating food.
I recently bit the bullet and started playing Breath of the Wild, and the difference is actually quite shocking. When taking on a challenge in Breath of the Wild, there are infinite numbers of ways to defeat it, like stealth, all-out combat, or maybe even avoiding it altogether. Pokemon Legends Arceus has steps in the right direction with stealth, stun, and catch gameplay loop, but for the time being it feels like a missed avenue for Pokemon to follow.
The story of Legends Arceus has got to be the weakest in the entire series, but Pokemon has never really been known for their stories.
Even in writing this review, we tried to incorporate the story, but there isn't much story to talk about.
Character interaction dialogue is much stronger than Sword and Shield. Comparatively, I found that the characters in Legends Arceus have a defined personality, while Sword and Shield characters were all too positive and somewhat jarring. Because the game is set in an ancient version of Sinnoh, I did enjoy the references to present characters, implying that they are those characters' ancestors. The small bubble dialogue was also fun, especially this kid.
It's the Stanley Spirit.
My biggest gripe for anything cinematic or any of the character dialogue is the absence of voice acting. So much of a character's personality can be multiplied by a voice, and during some really cool scenes could elevate the scene to even greater heights. There's only so much emotion you can throw into a text box at the bottom of the screen. I would even take generic grunting and mumbling at this point. Not every character sounds like
As someone who's aiming to become a completionist at this game, I gotta say, they got really carried away with the side quest system and Pokedex in this game. What Legends Arceus failed to do was offer up unique side quests that go beyond just completing some sort of checklist. As a matter of fact, if you were just starting off this game, you would notice right off the bat that it literally just borrows any sort of side quest system from any RPG. But the real culprit is the Pokedex. No, I'm not going to complain about the lack of a national dex. Someone thought it would be an amazing idea to throw in a bunch of tasks to complete the Pokedex. From catching a specific number of Pokemon, seeing it in battle, to maybe even seeing a shiny version. It really asks a lot from devoted players. It especially makes the Pokedex look beefier and much more worth the task of completing. Finishing the Pokedex is probably one of the only reasons one would spend hundreds of hours in this game. I bet you right now that our friend Jagji is already on his way to finishing each and every task. I cannot stress the importance of having a good soundtrack in any video game. It's essential to bringing out the vibes of the game and making it stand out among others. The music in this game is actually music. One of the things I was expecting walking into this game was something along the lines of Breath of the Wild's soundtrack. It managed to do some of that by bringing some ambient piano and flute music, but it wasn't over-exaggerated in comparison. But I'm just gonna go ahead and pull an Uno reverse on myself here. I like that this soundtrack did a better job of what nature would feel like. However, I'm a bit iffy on the other half of the soundtrack. For all the strides they made to separate themselves from the iconic Pokemon tracks in favor of more atmospheric and natural sounds, every once in a while you can still hear the modern sounds leak through. Considering the game takes place in an ancient Pokemon era, it feels a little jarring.
But you also haven't got far enough to hear this masterpiece.
Or to be fair, this one. Battling is the most frustrating part of this game for so many reasons. The new mechanic, Agile Style and Strong Style, add a whole new depth to the game, but in contrast, remove a whole lot.
While I still enjoyed the new Agile or Strong Move mechanics, I ended up just using a Strong Move 95% of the time against the trainer's Pokemon.
Sleep was changed to be like Paralysis, but you also take more damage, and Frozen turns into Frostbite, a status similar to Burn that has your special attack instead. The moves, on the other hand, were cut to pieces. Now there are only 180 moves compared to the 826 in previous titles, including some fan favorites like Earthquake being replaced by Bulldoze in favor of its secondary effect. In fact, most moves in the game have their secondary effects tweaked to suit the new styles. As much as I like this, it gets quite annoying if you already know all the moves. This is probably my biggest problem with the game in general. All the changes are nice, but it's a mess with my pre-existing knowledge of Pokemon. But before I start ranting, the battling is still fun as ever. All the major battles towards the end of the game are still what I would consider peak Pokemon. Using your team to beat an actually scary boss is such a fun experience that I wish was in the game more. There are, I believe, a total of 4 good fights, while the rest are just glorified wild battles.
I'm nowhere near a Pokemon Battle Pro, nor do I sweat about the stats of my Pokemon, but Pokemon Legends Arceus' battle system made me feel like a god sometimes. The trainer battles you occasionally encounter end up being a battle of numbers, where whoever has the most Pokemon in their party wins. Since most of the trainers have less than 6 Pokemon, it's a clean sweep. I also found that in trainer battles, I was one hit knocking out Pokemon, or they were doing the same to mine. Battles were finished incredibly fast without any challenge.
Personally, battling is the best of Pokemon. Competitive or not, Using your own Pokemon to destroy enemies is, once again, peak Pokemon. And it's the crux of replayability. I replay Pokemon games to probably an unhealthy degree. Pokemon just breeds an environment for you to constantly want to replay them. The feeling of training up your own unique team to beat a series of bosses never gets old to me. The only problem is that Pokemon Legends Arceus, as mentioned before, only has like 4 good fights backloading the game. So your team doesn't feel connected. There isn't any motivation to restart the game and give those fights another go. It's just such a wasted opportunity because the game loves to build relationships. But with the limited battling, your team just feels like tools to punch trees. Most of the time, by the end of the game, I'll gain a new appreciation for some Pokemon. And while it did happen here, it was because of the animations, not the battling like I would have hoped for. The Pokemon designs were divisive for some, but overall I think they nailed it. Almost all the designs are pretty good, but on the other hand, the lows were like really, really low. Like, wow. The bad are some of like the bottom 3 Pokemon designs. But, without further ado, great, good, okay, good, bad, cute as heck, disappointing, okay, weird, great, perfect. The hair, the glare, the edginess, ugh. Okay, not actually sure about this one. Barely any change, but good. Good, fantastic, divisive but good, worse than Weavile, decent, bad, gross, ugly, bad, what were they thinking? Ew. Oh, actually this one's pretty good, I like the Centaur. This will be a short section, because the lighting is a big problem with the game's looks. Because about anyone who likes or dislikes the game will agree, it doesn't look good, like, at all. I personally believe this is mostly down to the lighting. The light in Legends Arceus is mostly just one strong light coming from one direction. This makes the part bathed in light almost completely blown out and the rest to look manageable. It's crazy because default Unity assets don't look that great, but then one lighting setting later and they could look AAA quality. So, why'd they do this? Well, I guess I would assume it's so they could stylize the graphics, something really noticeable in the menus and some animations used in the trailers and marketing material. Does this mean I want the game to look like Okami? No, not really. I just want Pokemon to look better? I would even settle if it looked like the Pokemon shooter that was traveling the internet recently before its inevitable demise.
I never imagined shooting Pokemon in a fan game will look much better than the official game. Sorry for butting in here, Tyler, but I can't help but notice that there are just so many better options they could have gone with. The Xeno series, the Monster Hunter series, or even fellow Pokemon games like Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu execute the anime style better than Legends Arceus, and they're all on the Switch! As a friendly neighborhood Zelda fan, I would definitely say that Breath of the Wild's cell shading could have also been taken into consideration as well, because the colors in Legends Arceus feel weak and pale.
It's not all doom and gloom though, because for as much criticism that we have for this game, we still like it. So I guess it's time to be positive. After the nitpick garbage fest that was the animations in Sword and Shield, Game Freak stepped it up a notch with the animations in Legends Arceus. From the Pokemon turning around to each Pokemon having a sitting animation, Pokemon Legends Arceus has a lot of charm. I mentioned before that without battling I kind of felt distant from my Pokemon, but the animations swooped in and saved the day. Some of my new favorites from the game have to be Mr. Mime's sitting animation, and any Pokemon that sits down like a dog, really. Those animations carry the game, and most personal relationships like crazy. It's just a shame that wild Pokemon are so limited. The quality of the animations are great, all we need now is, well, more of them.
Prepare to be amused.
Get out of here!
No, stop! Get off the stage! You suck!
As Pokemon Legends Arceus ascends into B tier.
There's a lot of polishing to be done, Game Freak.
If you have anything to say about our ranking, comment down below, or you can start a conversation in our Discord server.
You can also find our other Pokemon reviews on the channel.